I'm Beck and welcome to my June wrap up. I read a whopping total of 15 books in the month of June, and I also DNF'd or put down 3 books. I want to talk about them, but first of all I just want to point out that my July TBR was like a very early self-fulfilling prophecy, because apparently my mood reading and my reading motivation just kicked up into overdrive. So a lot of the stuff that I said, oh hey, I hope I can read this, is probably going to appear in this video. I'm starting strong with a 5-star book, The Memory of Souls by Jen Lyons. This is the 3rd book in the Chorus of Dragons series. It is a series that I have been reading and loving, and this follows Kieran, who is a thief. He overhears the wrong thing and he gets catapulted into political intrigue while at the same time trying to fight for his life. And the 2nd book follows Janelle, but also Kieran as well. And Janelle as a kid was possessed by a demon and led what is called a hell march, where demons run amok in the human world. And after she was saved as a child, she now has these kind of demonic magic abilities, and she is recounting her story in the 2nd book and kind of rehashing what happened. So the 1st book is Kieran, the 2nd book is Janelle. Both of them kind of rehash and divulge information about similar events from different perspectives. But then in this book we follow Kieran, Janelle and Teraith. And Teraith is part of the Black Brotherhood. He is an assassin and they form the basis of a polyamorous trio, and it's hinted at very heavily in the first 2 books, so I don't think it's a spoiler to know that these 3 characters are trying to take on the big bad evil foe and stay afloat of political intrigue and ensure that people they love don't die. And it's been made very clear in this book that characters aren't safe, which is why when I was reading the last chunk of this book, I was very stressed, which is a good sign because it means that I care about the characters. And in the first 2 books, it felt like the pace lagged a little bit in some parts just because it was building up the world building and all of the different character royalty and houses and history in order to make this book so impactful. And I kind of struggled in my reread of the 2nd book specifically because I knew a lot of that backstory already and I just wanted to refresh my memory, but I'm so glad I did because this really just pulled no punches and I'm so happy I was on the front foot for all of it, and like I said, 5 stars. Then I continued straight on by reading The House of Always, which is book 4 in the Chorus of Dragons series, and there was a massive forced proximity element in this book which worked and also didn't work for this. It worked in the sense that it forced characters that you didn't realize would have any overlap to have conversations with each other, and those interactions were really valuable to me, but at the same time I was kind of flicking ahead sometimes to go, well, what happens after this situation, because I'm kind of getting a little bit restless and antsy. I did give this 4.5 stars though. It gave me so much more development of all of the characters that I deeply care about, and also surprisingly flipped the script on some of them too. And so because they felt so dynamic, it was really easy to understand them and their different backgrounds and how they kind of came together or butted heads. And I'm also just never able to predict what this series is going to throw at me next. So in terms of the plot, super surprising, can't predict anything. The writing is very descriptive. It was very complex, but I loved every second, and I gave this one 4.5. So it wasn't quite the 5-star echelons of book 3. I think that remains my favorite book of the series, but this one was still quite up there. And then you've probably guessed that I read the 5th book, Discord of the Gods in the Chorus of Dragons. I have a reading vlog as well for this one, as well as the books that I was reading around the same time. Obviously it's spoiler free. The tagline of this one is "The conflict could end them all." So it's the conflict between the big bad guy, between the gods in this world and all of our characters. And I love how all of those magic systems coalesced in order to make this such an epic final installment. Upon finishing this, I was so emotional, but now that I've reflected a little bit, I think instead of the 5 stars, I'm probably going to go for maybe a 4.5, just because some of the epilogue felt unresolved in terms of, like, I just wanted more of my favorite characters. Just know that it's like busy, it's complex, it's very stylized, it's very true to character, and it really delivered. And I'm so happy that it delivered, because I have so much fear when it comes to final installments in series that they're not going to be able to pull off all of the epicness, I guess, that they've set up along the way. And this had a road to get there. Like, there was a journey here, but I think it ultimately delivered, even though some things I'd like to tap some characters on the shoulder and be like, what's happening now? Like, it's good to want more from a series, and I hope that it's, I guess, investigated maybe on a blog or in a special edition. There's extra chapters. Like, I just want more of these characters, which I think is a good thing. And then because I finished a majorly complex fantasy book series, I needed to kind of cleanse my palette a little bit, because I was in a huge book hangover, and I picked up What You Gonna Do, which is like a witchy romance book. It's supposed to be a rom-com. It's about Tilda Sherwood. She is from a very powerful family of witches, and they're very famous on all their social medias, but Tilda has no magical abilities, and she runs all the social media accounts, and she also has this enemy named Gil Connolly, and she's the enemy of this guy because she's been set up on on dates with him in the past and they have ended awkwardly, but it's kind of like an enemy situation that she has created in her own head because he doesn't necessarily feel the animosity towards her that she feels towards him. And so that's why it's like an enemies to lovers thing. It also had kind of a backdrop of an evil council and them wanting to take over the world and Gil being wrapped up in that somehow. And it kind of felt a little bit contrived in terms of the plot. The characters didn't really communicate very well. And so ultimately I don't know if I want to give this a 3 stars or a 2 because I finished it very quickly. It's a short audiobook and I just snapped it up. I think my brain just needed something to suck in and then go, okay, we're done, and then move on. It was kind of like a rinse and repeat story. I mean, it was enjoyable. It was spicy in some parts as well, which was great, but ultimately I don't know if I would necessarily recommend this. Like, I read it and that's great. And then I read another installment in a series called Law Olympus. This is volume 4 that I had pre-ordered and I was hoping to give it 5 stars, but it didn't quite get there. Although I did really appreciate the way that this addressed the abusive relationships that these characters had been involved in. And I think it brought them to a good point where they can then proceed onwards from what they've realized and addressed in their own situations. I think it had important milestones in here, but at the same time it felt diluted in terms of distracting Hades and Persephone from being able to be present in the narrative together. It was kind of showing flashbacks and developing backstories, and I was like, some parts of this I can understand and enjoy, and other parts I'm like, I just am chomping at the bit. Like, I want to see more Hades and Persephone sharing screen time, please. So I gave this a 4 instead of a 5 because I still love the art style. I still laughed aloud at it. There was still a lot of moments in here that I thoroughly enjoyed. There was especially a moment with a dog that I really appreciated. But yeah, it just didn't quite deliver that 5 stars. And I feel like I have very much been chasing 5 stars and like upper echelons books after finishing the Chaos of Dragons and having them all 4 stars or above in rating. So this was, I mean, still 4. 4 is still good, but I was like, I just want it to be 5. And then I must have still been in a funk from finishing the Chorus of Dragons because I picked up another audiobook from my library called That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. And I got 70% into this before I decided, actually, I don't think I like this very much, and I put it down. And all of the people that described this as a cozy fantasy are liars. I'm calling you out now because this is just like a demon smut romance set in like a feudal era of some fantasy land. Like, it's about a woman who meets this demon. She initially saves him from a rock slide, and then after that he attacks her and she hides in the cinnamon fields, and that kind of repels him. And then he comes to her family, assaults her brother, and then they make a deal to go on this quest together so that they can destroy this oppressive entity that has been influencing their town for however many decades, and they revere it as like a religion, and it's realized that it's actually this lying entity, and now they have to go on this quest to destroy all the different shrines from this entity so that they can be freed. So I mean, I guess there's kind of a plot in there, but this demon has known this woman for 4 days and he's already saying like, I'm gonna make you my wife. Like, so how can a demon who respects consent and has this kind of dark brooding romance also go ahead and rip off somebody's arm and then not see a problem with that? I don't know, maybe I put this down because I have standards, but maybe also dark romance isn't my thing. I don't know. But anyway, I DNF'd it. And then I read a very hyped up popular book, and that is Fourth Wing. I have a separate spoiler-free review for this, which I will link because I'm gonna be able to describe it a lot better in that, because I wrote an entire script for that video, whereas here I'm just kind of going off the cuff. This is a story about Violet. She is from a very revered family. Her mother is the general, and her mother forces Violet out of her life where she thinks she's going to become a scribe and forces her instead to go to the Dragon Riders War College. And Violet has a chronic illness, and she's like, I have trained my entire life to go to the scribe quarter. I don't know why I'm going to the Dragon Rider quarter. I'm going to be murdered, or I'm going to absolutely die, just straight up from joining the War College. And so her mum doesn't really care about that, and she's like, go anyway, and forces Violet into this new path of life. And Violet, when she arrives at this War College, there is a guy named Zowden Rawson, and he is from a family that Violet's mother basically ticked off and betrayed in the past. And so because of all of that baggage from their parents' level, now they view each other as enemies to the point where they want to kill each other. And I was like, that's a bit extra, guys, but it really sets up the enemies to lovers thing quite early, and then lets that kind of fade a little bit in favor of developing the characters' relationships. And I really liked in this book that Violet called out things on the page as they were happening, and she was like, I don't like this behavior, I don't agree with it, it makes me feel uncomfortable, or I just don't like you. And so she would actually say what she was feeling a lot of the time, which made me continue reading this book. But then the world building kind of let it down a little bit, because while I can understand it as a general concept, like I couldn't describe it to you very well. And I know that there is a war. I know that people are trying to become dragon riders. I know that there is a shortage of dragons. And so the Dragon Rider School has become a lot more competitive. This also has steamy, spicy romance in it as well. So it's about characters who are in their early 20s rather than teenagers, which is a nice change. I gave this 3.5 stars. It was steamy. It had enough fantasy elements and plot for me to get invested in it. It wasn't just about the romance, although that did play a part in it as well. There's also a best friend at the school, and he helps and kind of protects Violet, but he becomes a little bit overbearing. He's the childhood best friend, and so naturally, because he's the childhood best friend, there is a love triangle between him, Violet, and Zordon? But anyway, I kind of predicted the plot in this book because it's just got that formula and it's easy to predict, but I still enjoyed the reading experience, so I'm keen to continue on with the sequel. I think it comes out in November, so 3.5 stars. Go check out my review. Go and chat to me about it. I'd like to hear what you think about it too. And then I finally continued my read of Fence because the rest of my volumes arrived. I talked about it in my book haul. Thank goodness I have it now. I gave this 3.5 stars. This is developing your understanding of fencing as a sport, and so because it's developing that aspect of, I guess, the world building, you could call it, because of the terminology and because the characters are getting into 3 days of fencing matches in order to determine who the new team will be. I was like, I don't love this as much yet because it's not building up the characters, it's building up the sport. But I'm sure things will occur in the next volumes that I'm gonna like more than this one, and that was the case. I did laugh or smile a little bit in this volume too, so it kind of drew me in enough for me to want to continue, and I mean that's a good thing because I had the rest of the volumes to continue anyway. Volume 3 was more about the team, which is what I wanted to read about, and it was building up the relationships, which I really appreciated. I'm not going to tell you what exactly happened because they're so short, so there's no point because I'll spoil it. I gave this a 4 stars. And then volume 4, there was a tournament, and that really showed the characters and their relationships and how they challenge and support each other as well. Again, it's even further developing the relationships that we were starting to glimpse in the previous volume. And so volume 4 was just a delight, and I gave this 4 stars. There is also the slow seeds of like kinship based on like a rivals that will likely become lovers. I'm really enjoying it. I gave this 4 stars. And then volume 5, I gave 4.5 stars just because the ending was so sweet. And this is really developing again more of the characters, but more so at the tournament when they're realizing each other's weaknesses and they're having a quiet moment to discuss those things, whereas before they would just shut each other out. So you can see all of those barriers beginning to break down, which is something that I just love to see. Whenever characters that dislike each other form this, I guess, mutual respect and then a trust and then potentially a romance, I'm like, consider me all in. I now love this. And then I listened to an audiobook called The Sun and the Star, a Niccolo D'Angelo story, and this is a standalone book by Rick Riordan in his Percy Jackson world, but it follows Nico and his boyfriend Will. Nico is the son of Hades and Will is the son of Apollo, so you've got the son of the underworld and then the son of Apollo, who is the sun god. So you've got like literal sunshine and literal dark and grumpy. So it's a very like stark theme there. And Nico is getting these dreams based on what happened in some of the previous books, and those dreams are pulling him back into the world of Tartarus, into Hades' realm. And Hades has previously forbidden Nico from going back to the underworld, so he has to kind of sneak into the underworld around Hades noticing him and save the character that seems to be trapped in damnation, but is obviously going to face a lot of trials and tribulations on the way, because that's really how a quest works. Usually on a quest, 3 characters as a trio go together, but in this case just Will and Nico go together. And what I liked most about this is the discussion of mental health and trauma based on obviously all the experiences of the demigods, and how that encouraged discussions in their relationship because they've been boyfriends for a year now, and so they're building this trust together and breaking down their own walls. And that was the most valuable part of this story. But when it came to some of the obstacles from getting them to succeed on their quest, it just felt like it was sending me on a runaround a little bit and deliberately putting hurdles in my path. It felt like the book really suffered in terms of pace, and it could have been a lot quicker had things been either cut out or shortened right down. But as always with Rick Riordan's books, the ending is my favourite part. It was a messy journey to get there, but I'm glad I stuck to it and listened to the ending, because just like the love and the passion and the understanding really just like hit this story home for me, and I really loved that about it. I still gave it a 3 stars. It's not my favorite of the Percy Jackson universe, but in terms of messaging, I really enjoyed it. Then I was like, oh, this audiobook came in from my library. I'd better give it a try before I decide to unhaul the first book in the series. So I read the book Witch Please, which is a romance comedy about a witch. I was like, oh, I don't love the whole consent thing. Witches can't talk about the fact that they're witches with people who aren't witches. I was tempted to DNF the series based on that, because, you know, if you're not able to share who you are with your partner, to me that's not consent. And apparently that's discussed as a whole thing in book 3. But the second book follows the cousin who was in the first book, and they run Fix-It Witches, which is their mechanics shop together. So it follows her and also a witch hunter, and he knows about witches, so you don't have that hurdle necessarily to get across. So I was like, okay, maybe I can do this book and then be around for the discussion in the third book. Nope, DNF at 17%. Like, they describe the love interest as smelling of leather and ash fell. Like, what? They're also in this kind of hazardous relationship, and after a few days, she buys him a pet for his birthday, and I'm like, why? Like, why? That is just, you know, in romance, how it's supposed to be like a parody of real life, right? So you're supposed to be able to suspend your disbelief, like, just a little bit. This was too far. It took me right out of the book. I'm like, I'm not enjoying this. These characters are frustrating me. The world is just annoying me. I'm going to put this book down. And I just returned it to my library without a second thought, and I'm done with this series. And then I read A Gathering of Shadows, which is continuing my reread of Victoria Schwab's Shades of Magic books before her new release at the end of September, early October. And this one was a 3.5 stars for me. I don't know how I initially gave this series 4 and 5 stars, but I did read it like 6 or 7 years ago. So I guess my reading taste has just changed a lot. And I also misremembered this. Like, I described the pitch of this book as having a magical trial, but that magical trial doesn't really kick off in the first half, and that's the whole draw card of this entire book. So you open the book with Lila, who is obviously in book 1, and she's learning how to become a pirate, and she meets Alucard Emery, who is a pirate captain. Kel, meanwhile, is still in Red London. It's been 4 months since the events of the first book have ended, and Lila's been on the ocean since, and Lila is starting to learn magic from Alucard, and she's also still got all of her trust issues, which, I mean, I get it, but it's also very frustrating to read from. And eventually, you know, with the magical trial, you're expecting them to come back to Red London, and so they all eventually cross paths with each other. So it was nice to see all of those relationships kind of explode in a great way, but Kel doesn't give me any kind of chemistry whatsoever. And I just don't know how I saw that when I initially read it. Like, I don't see anything. And I understand all the people who were like, I don't like Leela. She's getting on my nerves. Like, maybe that's an age thing. Maybe on a reread too, I realized this wasn't just a queer fantasy book, and it had a lot of flaws in terms of the writing style. I find V.E. Schwab's writing in here very stylized, which is a good thing, but sometimes it can just be overwritten to the point where I am realizing her repetition, I'm realizing what she's trying to set up, and it's just not working on me the same way it did initially. Basically, I just really liked Alucard, and I was really frustrated at his historical story. I'm trying to keep this spoiler free, but I'm really struggling. But anyway, like, I gave this 3.5 stars, but I'm thinking of reducing it to a 3. Like, it wasn't terrible, obviously, but it's just not what I was hoping it would be, and I've read it before, which is saying something. Leela's bullheadedness, for starters, is just driving me crazy, and before I thought she was great and stubborn, so I don't know, man, I don't know. I basically needed an intervention, so I picked up one of my favourites, and that is Silver Unto Nightfall by Rin Chupeco. This one follows Remy, who is a vampire hunter. He is the only son of the Duke of Valambon, so since he was like 16 or something, he's been training in combat, and all of the Reapers in Illyria, which is the kingdom he lives in, they don't like him, and they don't like him because of his reputation. Remy's mother, when she was pregnant with Remy, ran away with a vampire, and she was murdered while she was pregnant with him, and so everyone thinks that he's like half vampire, and that's why they hate him, because they fear and loathe his reputation, even though he sacrifices every day to protect the kingdom of Illyria by hunting vampires. So Remy's situation accidentally entwines with 2 noble court vampires, Jardin Song and Zidane Malik. They are the 3rd and 4th noble court vampires. They are also engaged, and they are trying to negotiate a peace treaty with the humans. And when Remy is attacked by this newfangled vampire, they realize that there is a plague that has been released somehow that they're calling the Rot, and it turns vampires essentially into zombie vampires. So they're like, we need to stop this, and they kind of knit together, because Malik and Song both have backgrounds in trying to find out about this virus and where it came from. So when Remy's attacked, he naturally gets brought into it as well, and they go on a quest together to find out where the source is, what's happening, and Remy forms feelings for both of these characters. So it's kind of like the emotional and empathetic one with Jadon Song, the grumpy and standoffish one with Zadar Malik, but he has vulnerability to him as well. So he's not just like that toxic brooding character. He's just that kind of standoffish character that he will crack his shell eventually. And then Remy's that grumpy, fiery character. So between all of them, they make a great poly trio because they balance each other really well. And I really like seeing that fiery personality clash with the brooding one. I think it's really funny at times, and also like really steamy in terms of tension in others. This is a great story. I absolutely adored it. It had brilliant world building, and the characters just have my entire heart and soul. I was laughing. This is just the perfect story. I loved it. So obviously I gave it 5 stars. That is why I reread it. I'm also mourning the fact that the sequel doesn't come out until April next year instead of October this year. So maybe I'll reread it again before April. I probably will. And then after finishing that book, I was like, I can't just go back to reading a book that I don't know if I'll enjoy or not. So I picked up another reread, and that is Red, White and Royal Blue, which coincidentally is one of the many books on this wrap-up that appears in my July TBR. This follows the first son of the United States. His name is Alex. His mother is the president, and they're currently in their campaign for her to win presidency again and go into a second term. So Alex is caught up in preparing for that campaign with his sister June. And then we've also got Henry, who is the Prince of Wales. And they've met before, they run in wealthy circles, but they essentially have this massive, like, I want to say meet cute involving a cake, and they're at this massive event together and they cause a spectacle by accident. And after this negative spectacle, they want to promote good press between both of them. So they are forced to work together to seem like they have this kind of bromance, and it starts as what Alex perceives it to be as like a rivals or enemies to lovers situation, and Alex realizes that he's had feelings this whole time. And I loved Alex's narration. It is like wildly chaotic but also hilarious, very descriptive, and you can also follow the whole thing. So it is not confusing, it's not jarring, it's very true to character, and it's also very spicy, like very good. And it's coming out as a movie in August. So I'm like, I need to read this in July so that I can read it in time for the movie coming out. And I read it in June. So I'm well before my deadline. Well done me. I gave this 5 stars if that wasn't obvious. And then I read and finished another series, which, pat on my back, I did amazing, but also it was A Conjuring of Light. And I want to give this a 2 stars, maybe a 2.5. I feel like 2 is a bit mean. I mean, while there were things that I liked about it, there were a lot more things that I disliked. So maybe 2 is accurate. Let me just describe to you how dramatic this book is, okay? Are you ready? This is a conversation between Kel and one of the other characters. It says, "You told me once that you were either master's magic or its slave. So which are you now? That's what you don't understand. I have only ever been its slave." That is such a dramatic way of writing. And that is almost how the whole book is written, both in dialogue and in narration. And it just really grinds me. I just did not like the fact that it was written with like a teen drama angst, and these characters are supposed to be in their early 20s. It was just frustrating. And I had the same problems in this one that I had in Gathering of Shadows. The chemistry didn't carry over. The 2 characters, Lila and Kel, who are supposed to be forming this trust and romance, it seems like they're going, "Ooh, I love you and I trust you," in one sentence, and then in a conversation later, multiple times across the book, they're just arguing with each other and treating each other like crap. Like, that's not a relationship. I see more chemistry with Alucard and Lila than I do with Kel and Lila. There was also a key moment of development of one of the characters. It's got miscommunication all the way through it, and that miscommunication is only brought to attention at the end of the entire book. And I'm like, if you just had a conversation, you could have avoided all this drama 2 books ago. I think my 2-star rating is valid because I'm getting frustrated. Am I going to read on? Yes, with the Fragile Threads of Power, because I think V.E. Schwab's developed her writing to a point where it's way beyond this. This was 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And I loved The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So she has grown. Will I be frustrated? Will I buy the book? Will I DNF it? That's all on Future Beck to decide. I'm just happy that I've managed to reread and refresh everything, because there were a lot of minor things that happened at the end of this book that I would not have remembered. So I've refreshed my memory. Let's leave it at that. It's been a wild time because now I have one more book, and that was also a new release on my July TBR. And I've basically just grabbed my entire July TBR and just thrown it away because I started Witch King by Martha Wells and I thought I'm gonna love this because it's a fantasy book and it's about demons. The first couple of chapters, I was like, what the hell is going on? Because we start off with Kai. He's a demon who's possessing this body. He is the Witch King, like that's his title. It's talked about the first few chapters, like that's not a spoiler. And he's in this tomb. He's entombed with, I think, his companion or friend. And so while he's being dug out of this tomb by these guys who brought along this sacrifice, presumably to use the sacrifice to resurrect Kai, he steals the intruder's life force, keeps this woman alive, and then also saves his friend who is also entombed. So you don't know why they're entombed. You don't know what their goal initially was, that they were entombed and that goal is now ceased. You don't know who this sacrifice is or where they're going next. And it's supposed to be a hook, but I was like, I am bamboozled and confused. I don't care about any of these characters yet, and you're just throwing me into the action, showing me that one character who is a demon can absorb other people's life force, and yet you're telling me he's the good guy. What's going on? So for a hook, it's really unclear. It's difficult to get your bearings. It feels very chaotic, and I just felt alienated by it, and I put it down. I was like, I'm not enjoying it. I don't care. Clearly the only way I'm going to get more 5-star books is if I reread them at this point, because I'm trying and it's not succeeding. Also in Witch King, there was this thing that I hate, and Martha Wells used the sacrifice, who is this young woman, as the character who doesn't know anything. And so you get Kai explaining everything to her as if she is just there as a reader placeholder. Like, that is the most lazy way to tell a story to me. I'm sorry. It needs to be said. So with that disappointing conclusion of DNFing Witch King, which I thought would be amazing, I now would like to report that this wrap up is over. So I read 15 books, I DNF'd 3 books. Hopefully my reading motivation means that I'll read a ton more in July. I don't know what they'll be, given that I apparently read all of them in June. But anyway, let me know if you've read a bunch of these. Go check out my reviews and my vlogs. I'll link them down below. Thank you again so much for watching this video, and I'll talk to you in the comments. Bye.